Is China now a big factor in the Iran war and in determining how and when the war ends? Donald Trump, in one of his more unhinged posts, even by his standards, is speaking about expecting a big fat hug from Xi Jinping. This hours after China made one of its most strident and assertive statements, warning Trump that his naval blockade of Iran was both dangerous and irresponsible. In fact, Xi Jinping specifically referred to hegemons who are taking the world back to the rule of the jungle. On the program today, we'll be looking at the China factor as well as what is actually brewing as Asim Munir continues to be de facto representative of Donald Trump, carrying presumably America's message to Tehran. And now reports emerging that Pakistan's army chief could also be headed to Washington. This as Trump casually has declared that the war could end in the next couple of days. How, when, and why, nobody quite knows the answer to. I'm Barkha. You're with the Mojo story. On the program today, we look at the letters exchanged between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. Trump revealed to Fox News that he had written to Xi Jinping asking China not to supply weapons to Iran. This is the Financial Times reported that a Chinese satellite, a spy satellite, had been used by Iran to target US bases in the Middle East. Trump says that Xi Jinping wrote back to say that China was not supplying weapons to Iran. But let's also juxtapose this with China's big statement calling Trump's naval blockade dangerous and irresponsible. Soon after, Trump spoke about opening the Strait of Hormuz for China and for the rest of the world. I'm quoting directly how Trump plans to do that. Nobody quite knows. China has said that it will simply power through the strait as it needs to. Remember, 98% of Iran's oil actually moves towards China. While all of this is happening, Pakistan's army chief Asim Munir was in Tehran, and Al Jazeera is now reporting that he could be headed to Washington soon. How is Pakistan carrying along the interests of both China and the United States of America is one of the many contradictions of this war. Is this war really nearly over, as Trump suggests? And what about the Israel factor? Most Americans believe that Netanyahu could sabotage whatever attempts are being made for a more lasting ceasefire agreement. Israel and Lebanon will also be talking America time Thursday, as Trump said, after decades of not talking. Let me introduce two very distinguished experts today to try and make sense of all that is happening, all that is revealed, and some that is not yet fully understood. Military veteran and author General Raj Shukla is with us. Always a pleasure. And joining us from the United States of America today is Ali Wine. He is, of course, a senior advisor for U.S.-China relations at the International Crisis Group. Thank you very much, both of you. Ali, if I may start with you, what do you make of China suddenly entering the public rhetoric around the war? The first time we heard from China publicly is when China and Pakistan released a 5-point plan for a ceasefire agreement. After that, the tone has been quite different. China has been quite assertive and strong in criticizing Trump's naval blockade, and it seemed to have worked with Trump tackling, chickening out, and backing down, and then saying, oh, no, I'm going to keep the strait open for the Chinese. He doesn't have any control over the strait. But how are you reading this? And then saying, I'm hopeful of getting a big fat hug from Xi Jinping. Ali.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the program. It's great to be back with you. So a couple of reactions. The first reaction is that even though I think that China is more insulated from energy shocks than many of its neighbors, its energy resilience won't last forever. The longer the strait is sort of de facto closed, the more China's energy resilience is tested. So China, of course, has economic interests in ending the war. It has economic interests in extending the ceasefire. So I think that once you couple the de facto closure of the strait with now the U.S. blockade, I think that combination is heightening China's concern that this crisis could actually escalate for much longer. So China wants to extend the ceasefire, wants to wrap up this crisis. Now, on the second point that you made about sort of the bromance or the seeming rapport between President Trump and President Xi, I think that what China's statements in recent weeks, its increasingly assertive statements in recent days and weeks demonstrate is the amount of leverage. We now have the summit between Trump and Xi was supposed to take place a few weeks ago. It was postponed on account of the crisis in the Middle East. It looks like it's going to proceed in the middle of next month, May 14th to May 15th. It demonstrates, I think, the extent of the leverage that Xi has vis-a-vis Trump, and it also demonstrates I think that Trump needs this summit with Xi more than the other way around. He can ill afford a fresh economic rupture between the United States and China ahead of midterm elections in November in the United States. So he wants to consolidate the trade truce of the two leaders blessed in South Korea this past October. He values his relationship with President Xi, and he recognizes, because of the bruising trade war that took place between Washington and Beijing last year, that China can not only hold its own in absorbing U.S. economic pressure, but it can retaliate in ways that really hurt American farmers, that hurt American companies in ways that really no other country can. So I think it just demonstrates, all of these developments demonstrate, I think that China wants to wrap up this crisis. Also, it has significant leverage over Trump's calculations.
That said, Ali, and I'll take this to General Shukla, we've had Pete Hegseth, the US War Secretary, speak moments ago, and he is being as strident as ever on Hormuz. He's claiming that the Americans do have control over the Strait of Hormuz because Iranians, quote unquote, do not have a navy anymore, and that the naval blockade will continue for as long as it takes. This is Pete Hegseth speaking moments ago. General Shukla, it seems to be a lot of bluster because we've seen in the last couple of days even US sanctioned ships being able to pass through the straits. Trump had to, US Central Command had to correct Trump, because actually they cannot blockade the strait. They can blockade Iran. Blockading the strait would be illegal under international law. That said, Trump can't seem to decide, is he blockading the strait to open the strait? None of it actually makes any sense. Do you agree with Ali that China actually has more power in the room right now than the Americans, who are just inextricably tied in this war that they can't win and they can't leave? It's a bit Hotel California.
So, I have a very different view on China. I think China is central to all the troubles of Trump and the United States of America. So let me say how. There is enough, at least what you see on in writings all over. General Keane, who is some kind of insider on what's happening in the United States today, is categorical that the Chinese were helping the Iranians in the building of their missile cities, solid fuel, extending their ranges, and all the stuff, nuclear stuff that was happening in Pickaxe Hill. In fact, that was the central reason which pushed Trump to do what he did. And of course, Netanyahu egged him along. So I'm saying the Chinese are central. What have they done? Short of all the known American red lines, they have done everything like they did with the Russians. So they've given them components, they've given them solid fuel, petrochemicals, all the stuff that lies, at the cusp of civil-military fusion. So the components into drones, missiles, everything. Do you think Iran was in a position to do such accurate targeting without Baidu 3? So I'm sure Trump knows it. He's just trying to be, innocent and friendly because he has to get along with somebody. He's fighting with the whole world. There's only China left. Chinese private companies have been giving imagery to Iran. It's as obvious as that. And let me tell you one, I want to just highlight one interesting thing. Yesterday, I was just watching a program on CSIS which spoke of what lessons the Chinese have already drawn and what they are drawing. And that sent me to some links on social media and all. I would just like to, this was amazing. What are the lessons they have already drawn? One is they are worried about the deep penetration of the Iranian regime. So they are doing an audit in their own context, hoping that they are not as deeply penetrated. And look at the second conclusion. They are saying that the Americans were never serious about negotiations. They use diplomacy as a cover to fight and strike. And therefore, now let me tell you, so both the sides know that the May summit is all about shadow boxing. There is low trust. Because I'm quite convinced, even Iran and the West Asian crisis have some linkages to the larger Cold War between the two. Look at this third conclusion they have drawn. The salience of hard power. They are saying it's not the economy, not technological capacities, but brute force which matters. There are n number of discussions on use of advanced capacities like Claude and Maven by the Americans, and they are taking measures. They are looking at this whole business of cost symmetry. You
Yeah.
know how the Iranians are spending only $1 billion a month and the Americans are spending $10 billion a week. And I'm saying very realistic conclusions they are drawing. And the last point is, of course, there are two views here, but they are saying that the USA is determined to root out Chinese influence in West Asia. Now, if you look at all this, I mean, the Chinese have no doubts about the way that their relationship with the Americans is heading. And now I'll just like to, to draw one, and this is my own inference. This is now not from the Chinese social media and all. In the larger chessboard, see how the two sides are feeling out each other. So let's say USA. USA's energy security, I think it leads. China has vulnerabilities, as Ali was telling us, in energy. In AI, USA is far ahead. It is in its military power that China doesn't come even a close second. USA can project power 2 oceans away. China has not even acquired regional poise so far. So many hesitancies in doing Taiwan. But China has great advantages in technological and industrial dominance. So I think this is what they are feeling out. And I have my hunch that, of course, the central driver in the Iranian conflict was the nuclear stuff. But this business about energy security, oil,
Yeah.
I mean, Trump knows that the central response to the chokehold on rare earths has to be energy. And he knows China's vulnerabilities. So I'm saying there is a far more sophisticated game being played out. The Chinese have done all that they could for the Russians and the Iranians. And the last point is that while Trump, with his, shall I say, less than wise rhetoric, is splitting his allies, the CRIC alliance is weak, but it is holding together. China,
Okay.
Russia, Iran, and North Korea. So that's my take on it. And China is central to all the troubles of Trump and the United States. And may I just say one more thing? To Trump's credit, he was the first American who called out the Chinese. In his first term, he made the Chinese threat public. The presidents before him were a little coy.
But
So
General
Trump
Shukla,
knows
he's
that
now,
very
but he's now looking for a big fat hug from Xi Jinping. So,
well.
Trump
Why he says that, he doesn't mean all these things. Big hat, Nick. Today it's a big fat hug. Tomorrow it'll be a big fat cake.
somebody, somebody, Ali and General Shukla, somebody was interviewing, I think, Dave Chappelle, the very well-known comic in the United States of America. And he was asked, do you think Trump is funny? And he said, I may have thought Trump is funny if Trump's actions were not so consequential. So that's what I would say to you, General Shukla, that while we all chuckle at him, over him, about him, the fact of the matter is that just the power he wields by the position he occupies is so cataclysmic that what could be dismissed as just ha ha ha, he just talks like that,
I'm not doing
actually starts having consequences.
No, on your show, I've said it so many times that Trump must be taken seriously, but not literally.
Okay,
so big hug doesn't mean hug, but it's very serious.
I get it. Ali, 2 questions for you. One is, do you believe that the war must end for Trump before he meets with Xi Jinping? We've already seen the Trump-Xi meeting postponed on account of the war. Now it's, as you said, it's going to be somewhere in the second week of May. Does that mean that we work backwards as a timeline for the war to end, that's the outer limit by which it must end? The second question is, there's a lot of reporting that the American buildup, the military buildup, has not stopped or reduced in the Middle East, and therefore this isn't over till it's over, and that Netanyahu still holds many cards or many capacities to sabotage this. I say this as this is the day also that Israel and Lebanon are going to open direct talks. So how do you see this timeline? Do we take it that one way or the other this war has to end before Trump meets Xi?
I think that President Trump would certainly like for the war to be over by that time, because keep in mind how much he had been looking forward to the now delayed summit. He had been looking forward to that summit very much. The relationship between the United States and China, it's far and away the world's most consequential relationship. So he probably wasn't pleased that the summit was delayed. he doesn't want the summit to be delayed again. And I think he also he likes to convey control. And the fact that the summit was postponed and the fact that the war, I think, is escalating in ways that the president and his team hadn't anticipated, it underscores that he isn't sort of fully in control in his foreign policy agenda. I don't think that he wants to go to Beijing and have the dominant agenda item be the Middle East crisis. He has many other items that he would like to discuss with President Xi. He wants to talk trade. He wants to talk technology. He wants to talk investment. I think that he's looking to bring down the economic temperature. I think that he's looking to pursue what his administration's national defense strategy calls a decent peace. And I don't think that he wants this Middle East crisis to dominate the agenda. So I think just in terms of the timeline, I think that he would like to wrap up this war by the time he and Xi meet. But to your second question, you might be able to control the timing of when you initiate military action. It's much harder to control the timeline of when you actually wrap up the conflict because, of course, it's not only the United States that has a say. Iran has a say. There are other actors, other countries that have a say. So in terms of the timeline, Iran also gets a vote. And Iran thus far, it seems, and which is encouraging, it seems that Iran is open now to a second round of negotiations. Let's hope that this second round of negotiations bears more fruit than the first one did. But it's not only the United States that gets a say, Iran gets a say as well. And I think that it's determined to demonstrate the more pressure that the United States imposes, military and economic, the more determined it seems that the Iranians are to say, we will not capitulate. So as long as Iran has a vote, but this brings me back to a point that I wanted to make earlier, which is, in terms of how we get out of this crisis, in terms of how we end the war, the United States needs a face-saving option. Iran needs a face-saving option. So the ideal solution, in recognizing, of course, that there is no good solution, the solutions go from bad to catastrophic. The best solution is one in which the United States, President Trump can say, I won, and in which the Iranian leadership can say, we won. And if they can both have that face-saving option, maybe we have a way out of this crisis by the time that President Trump meets with President Xi next month.
Let me just get in a question to you, Ali, and then to the general about Pakistan. Pakistan has long been seen as extremely proximate to China. And as I said, the first time we saw China making a public utterance, it was actually a 5-point plan by Pakistan and China. Since then, we've seen Pakistan's army chief emerge as this sort of conduit between all the players involved. He was in Tehran. He's now reportedly heading to Washington. Is there not a central contradiction here on multiple fronts? One, if America and China are intrinsically at odds with each other, how does Pakistan square its relationship with China with its sort of emerging proximity, at least to Trump, if not to America? Question one. Question two, Pakistan has a military pact with Saudi Arabia. It obliges Pakistan to be on Saudi Arabia's side when Saudi Arabia comes under attack if this war were to escalate further. That's a contradiction. How do you see these contradictions when it comes to Pakistan? And you know, this is, by the way, as news is coming in, that General Kane has just said that America is entitled to target ships aiding Iran in territorial and international waters. So I don't know how aiding is defined, but if we say that the Chinese are aiding the Iranians, then I mean, is America really going to want battle with the Chinese in the high seas? Sorry, that's just a breaking news update we have. But Ali, go ahead, and then General Shukla.
Sure. So I mean, to the questions that you just raised, I think that Pakistan's role is not only Pakistan's role in this particular crisis, in which Pakistan is trying to burnish its credentials as a diplomatic kind of go-between, but I think that Pakistan's, you could say, maybe rapport not with the United States, perhaps, but at least I think the rapport, you could say, between certain elements of Pakistan's leadership and with the president and some of his advisors, those developments are very surprising, because if you look at the relationship between the United States and Pakistan, say, especially between the terrorist attacks of 9/11 and then the President Trump's retaking of office, the relationship, it had ups and downs, mostly downs, and the trajectory was very strained at best. So I think that Pakistan is having sort of something of a halo moment. If you look, Pakistan signed a critical minerals deal with the United States. It's now emerging as a critical intermediary. And then in terms of the contradictions that you mentioned, so balancing relations with the United States and China, balancing relations with Saudi Arabia and Iran, I think this kind of multi-alignment strategy, and here I use multi-alignment, of course, borrowing a phrase that India's External Affairs Minister, Jai Shankar, has really done a lot to popularize. I think that multi-alignment model is very much the way of the future. It's very much the direction of travel. So I think we are seeing many countries, Pakistan included, that are trying to adopt that multi-alignment model. I'll just make
will the Chinese be okay with their proximity to Trump?
I mean, thus far, I don't think that they've exhibited any particular concern because I think that they recognize that the structural factors probably favor a more durable relationship between Pakistan and China, whereas what we're seeing right now, the dynamics between Pakistan and the United States, I think that those are more personality driven than they are structural. I mean, yes, Pakistan is playing an important diplomatic intermediary role right now, but I think that if you're China, you say, look, regardless of who the occupant of the White House is, Pakistan will want to deepen its economic relationship with China. But the relationship between Pakistan and the United States, the current period is very much an aberration. It's very personality driven. And so I think that there are questions about the extent to which structurally there might be some rapprochement between Pakistan and the United States.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to put it because a lot of it has to do, some say, with sort of business interests, some say cryptocurrency and the investments that part of Trump's family have made in businesses in Pakistan are influencing this. So you do see it as an aberration, and I think that's an interesting and important way to put it. General Shukla, let me bring you in. From an Indian perspective in particular, yes, I take Ali's point that it's personality driven. It could be Trump and Asim Munir. It could be business interests that are overlapping with the cryptocurrency, as we know. But when we look at it from our vantage point, we see an adversary. We certainly see Pakistan as an adversary. We see an adversary cozying up to Trump, and China playing some sort of deep game here that we aren't maybe fully able to grasp. I mean, you are maybe, but I think a lot of Indians are like, hey, what's going on here? So what is going on here, General Shukla?
So see, in my view, and I've been pretty consistent on this, Pakistan is not a threat. It is a pest. For a country of India's size and strategic heft, it is not a threat. It is a pest, a troublesome pest. I'm not quite overjoyed at it, but Asim Munir seems to be the current Henry Kissinger. I mean, flying to Tehran, flying to Washington. That is a reality. But see, what is this a consequence of? This is a consequence of India's national strategic heft and the independent streak in its foreign policy. We had trouble with traditional American administrations, but to get along with a MAGA administration is particularly difficult. Because, see, their argument is different. Between China and India, it is clearly one tiger on a hill. So that is the battle here. But with the MAGA administration, the problem is that, listen, if we are friends, then you will do this and this and that. India is never going to do this and this and that. India is far too independent. And that is something people have to realize, which Condoleezza Rice realized when she said India's rise is in America's interest. Now you have, who was that, Barkha? Deputy Secretary of Commerce or somebody in Delhi who said that we will not make the mistake that we made with China. We will not aid India's rise. Yeah. Now, Pakistan does not have to battle with these dilemmas because it doesn't matter in the larger international system. So, so that is really the point. And now there is it time to examine that is a close embrace with MAGA worth it? Look at Vance traveling to Hungary, campaigning for Orban, and his ratings falling by 5%, and see how he got decimated. So MAGA and this Trumpism, its international brand, is kind of getting toxic. Look at the Gulf Arab allies. I mean, I keep making this point. This is typical Trump diagonal escalation, that I will hit Iran and Iran will hit with all my friends. And all my friends will suffer misery in silence. So it doesn't really, with Trump, it is a little difficult to do business. Congratulations to Asim Munir. I mean, he's making the most of the moment. But India can't do that because of our size, our heft, our independent streak. May I just make a comment, on a couple of other things?
Yeah.
Look at the stalemate in the Strait, and I'd love to hear Ali on this. There are three blockades. One is to keep Iranian oil commodities from flowing. The Americans are doing it. The other is to prevent Gulf Arab oil and commodities from flowing. The Iranians are doing it. And there is a third now, if that meeting succeeds in Paris or wherever, where the British and French are going to referee a third blockade, getting oil out closer to Oman. So, I mean, what is this going to result in? And now we've had this discovery, if this imagery is to be believed, that 50% of Iranian launchers, missiles, and drones are intact underground, which means the ceasefire will only help, this truce will only help them to beef up their capacities, so that other American claim of them having completely decimated the Iranian military wherewithal does not seem to be true at all. So I'm saying this is getting increasingly complicated, and I think nobody knows it better than Trump. Therefore, he's desperate for a deal. And I think it was Al Jazeera this morning that in the nuclear bid, the nuclear negotiations, they have kind of agreed on shipping out the highly enriched uranium. The only sticking point is the moratorium on, enriching. And as I was discussing with Ali before you came, Iranians are saying 5 years, the Americans are saying 20. Are settle for 10, Baba. Settle for 10, 15, and let the world live in peace. That is what you want. And let me tell you, let me say how this is going to pan out. The Iranian regime will survive. It will survive with 50% of its military wherewithal intact. It will survive with much of the nuclear know-how intact. And Trump will survive. Trump is also shrewd. The only needle he looks at it is MAGA base. And I don't know what Ali, but what I've been reading from here, while if there is a general, blue wave, the MAGA base is intact. So even Trump will survive, and he will do he's very good at spinning the whole narrative to say that we got off. So I'm saying if he gets off with this 10-year moratorium, it's a big win for him. He'll say, I battered their military. This is better than JCPOA. So I sense that we are close to a deal. And that is why Asim Mir, is carrying these messages so hurriedly to Washington. But what should really worry us is, very knowledgeable people tell me that even if you do a deal over the next week, the economic consequences will still carry through to May. So while Trump will survive, the IRGC and the Ayatollahs will survive, the rest of the world will be in misery.
Well, that's the irony, that we're all having to pay a price for a war that we had no say in, were against, and yet the principles will move on. We already have data, for example, that the Iran war has dragged India's goods exports 7% lower in March. This is CNBC reporting this. So let me bring in Ali. Do you agree with General Shukla that A, we're close to a deal? B, the MAGA base, certainly a very high-profile section of it has lambasted Trump, from Tucker Carlson to Joe Rogan to Megyn Kelly, Candace Owens. These were all sort of Trump acolytes who are now just gunning for him, and he's gunning back for them. But is it fair to say that there hasn't been a domestic political cost to Trump as of now? Yes, gas prices are higher. He's saying, they'll come down soon. He has till November. Midterms are in November. He doesn't have to run again. He has very little the only thing is he might be scared of being impeached. Do you A, agree that we are close to a deal, and B, that Trump has or will insulate himself from the political costs of what he's done to the rest of the world?
Well, I certainly hope that we're close to a deal. I don't place too much confidence in my predictive abilities. I think that the decade of Trump, or I should say the decade of Trump's dominance of American politics, has sort of chastened me when it comes to making predictions about what's going to happen a year from now, let alone or a day after tomorrow, let alone a year from now. But I hope we're close to a deal. And as I said earlier, I think that both the Americans and the Iranians have an incentive in finding a face-saving off-ramp. In terms of the political question, I think I would distinguish between Trump himself and I would say the Republican Party. I think I agree with your premise. President Trump himself, he does have a very loyal base. Depending on which polling you look at, it seems that the war in Iran is broadly popular with the MAGA base, although, as you say, there are some very high-profile dissenters. As far as the Republican Party, though, I think that the Republican Party is increasingly concerned about the political impact. I mean, even before the war in Iran, the Republican Party's prospects in the midterm elections coming up this November were not looking very good. I think that the Iran crisis is only going to compound their electoral woes. Many Democrats and even, frankly, many Republicans are saying this war was not necessary. It was a war of choice. It's driving up gas prices. There doesn't seem to be an end in sight. It's disrupting food markets, not just energy markets. And I think so. I would distinguish between the president himself, because as you said, the president doesn't have to worry about running for re-election. He has a very loyal, base. But I think that for many sort of Republicans downstream, they are worried about their political fortunes.
So just before I give General Shukla the closing comment, Ali, just a quick response from you. We have two updates from Pete Hegseth. While we're talking to you, his press conference is running parallel, so I'm just getting updates. One is that Hegseth claims that China has vowed no weapons transfer to Iran during the ceasefire, which means it may well have happened well before, through the 6 weeks of the war. Two, Hegseth is claiming that Mujtaba Khamenei is injured but alive. This has long been speculated. Where is Mujtaba? So these are the two statements from Hegseth. On China, on the American claim that China is not transferring weapons to Iran during the ceasefire, do you believe that? And what is China's end goal here? How would China like to see this all end?
So China would like to. China, as I said earlier, it wants this conflict to wrap up, as soon as possible. It welcomes the fact that the United States is bogged down once again in the Middle East, but it doesn't benefit from a protracted conflict. So it wants an end to the conflict sooner rather than later. I think that it wants a smooth meeting between President Trump and President Xi. And I think that I would say more broadly, China wants to position itself as, you could say, kind of the responsible diplomatic intermediary, a more responsible geopolitical player. China wants to present itself as being a stabilizing force, at least relative to the United States. It wants to present itself as a diplomatic intermediary, in contrast with the United States, which, according to China and many other countries, initiated a war that didn't have to be initiated. So China has economic, energy, and other reasons to wrap up the war, extend the ceasefire, and to try and present sort of a diplomatic juxtaposition or a contrast between the way that the United States has been carrying on and the way that China believes that it is carrying on. So it's going to try to set up that diplomatic and geopolitical contrast.
General Shukla, your closing thoughts?
So deferring to Ali's superior wisdom, let me qualify by saying that maybe a deal is around the corner. And why I say it, what is the sticking point? Apart from this moratorium on enrichment, I see no other sticking point. Look as far as the strait is concerned, this is all posturing. Everybody wants the strait to be open. I mean, that's the easier part. Now and look at what the Iranians will benefit from: defreezing of assets, getting over sanctions. I mean, IRGC will jump at the offer, getting prosperity back. It will give their regime a fresh lease of life. So I really see, not too many obstacles. This other point that Ali made is exactly why the Iranians are, the Chinese are, I would say, a lot more shrewd than the Americans. The Chinese also have global ambitions, except they do it quietly. You show me one piece of paper which says that the Chinese will give Pakistanis these weapons. And they have given them everything from small arms to artillery to the maritime leg of the nuclear triad. And what is the grand agreement? Higher than the Himalayas, sweeter than honey. You keep deciphering what it means. They do not operate like the Western democracies do, quibbling over every part that to be. What did they do to the Russians in Ukraine? That should be learning for us. They give them all kinds of componentry so that the Russians were back in the battle. But did they violate any express, laws? They didn't. They are extremely shrewd at this game, and they have done it again with the Iran. Also, the Russians. About Trump, I mean, of course, Ali is the resident expert, but my understanding is this: that why Trump is pushing the envelope. Firstly, he made 2-3 points in the American mind space. He said Obama prioritized Iran over Israel. I'm prioritizing Israel over Iran. That matters greatly to the MAGA base. When he says these things, I'm saying the very potent influencers like Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson cease to matter to the MAGA base. And Trump is shrewd enough to know it. It is my sense that while he may have trouble in the midterm elections, he's confident that he will not lose both the houses. Maybe one, but not the both. And therefore, he doesn't get impeached. And the good bunny who's really taking all the beating is J.D.
His
Vance.
Vance. His Vance.
In a recent event in Washington or somewhere in America, he was heckled.
Turning point. I know also
Yeah,
turning point when
turning point.
nobody,
He was heckled.
nobody showed up, not even Charlie
Firstly,
Kirk's
nobody
wife.
showed up, and then he was publicly heckled.
Yes,
It was
yes.
something about Christ, that Christ would not have done genocide or so.
Mm.
So his supporters around him are suffering. His advisors will suffer. Now you see, Hexeth and Dan Kane will have to walk back on these claims of destroying the Iranian military.
Yeah.
And this is how it always happens in these long wars. This is hubris that you can militarily, destroy a civilization. It just doesn't happen. And I say this, and I've said it so many times on your show, that the American military is a great military. The kind of stuff they do, no military in the world can do. 2 oceans away, power projection, but they have limitations. Every military has limitations, and those limitations are now surfacing.
Yeah. Well, all I can say is that I hope our best estimations about an imminent deal are correct, because as both of you have pointed out, the principles of this war, the Iranians, certainly the government in Iran has got a new lease of life, and the Americans might think that they're too big to be seen as failing, even though most of the world believes that they have lost this war. But it's the rest of the world that's paying a price, and how. And so all we can do is hope that this is coming around to a deal. Thank you so much. The China factor is particularly interesting and adds a layer of intrigue to the whole proceeding. Trump and the Chinese are poles in contrast, right? Trump does everything in public, even think aloud. And the Chinese are the masters of subterfuge. That's the chessboard. Thank you, General Shukla. Thank you, Ali Wine. A pleasure as always. And thank you to our audience. See you soon.
Thank you. Great pleasure. Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.